Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. Great chats as always. Warren, you're the man. Love every time you speak. So you're an inspiration to all of us here down in sunny South Africa. Something that's not on my LinkedIn profile. That's actually a bit of a tough one because I tend to share a lot. I believe that as much as I can put up a business facade, I'm a complex being. So I like people to understand all parts of me. But something I haven't shared on LinkedIn yet, and something I've been doing a lot in lockdown for the last few months, is I've been honing in on my cooking skills specifically for Chinese food. So
Wow.
I went out, dusted off my wok back in March, and now I can prepare about 9 different Chinese dishes perfectly, but I am biased. So my wife says they're delicious, but I guess she's just saying that because she's not cooking that night. But yeah, that's something people don't know about me, is that at the moment really into Chinese food.
Oh, beautiful, MJ. I hope you're going to be inviting us for dinner one of these good days.
Everyone's invited.
But me, what about you?
Yes, there's actually quite a lot I don't share on my LinkedIn profile. So everything on my LinkedIn profile has been mainly work-related stuff. One thing most people don't know about me is that I actually like gaming from time to time. So that's definitely not on my LinkedIn profile. Any of those games that I actually play when I'm just trying to de-stress or yeah, take it easy.
Nice, nice. Love it. And Warren, how about you?
I'm going to ask you the same question afterwards, Ayanda. I have a very real side hustle, and my side hustle is my passion, which is in African contemporary art, and I'm an art dealer. My side hustle is that I'm a collector and an art dealer.
Oh, wow. That's actually very interesting. Sure. I
Thank
think I'd
you.
love to see some of those collections of yours.
Sure.
Sure. Well, I'm not going to take that question because I've said it so many times and I've actually run out of answers. So I'm going to go straight into our very first official question. And, it's really around, obviously, we know that personal branding is a ubiquitous term sometimes. And do you feel it has a place in our modern vocabulary? And if so, how do we distinguish our personal brands from our business brands? Warren, maybe can we hear from you first around that?
I think it has a very, I support, I back it, I support it. I think in B2B, there's this notion of social selling. And, whilst people buy from people they trust and have a chemistry with and like. And when you think of the frameworks behind social selling, that can also be a very scientific and deliberate process. So one's personal brand is important, specifically if it's linked to some layer of expertise. I spend a lot of time working on my personal B2B sales and marketing credentials because when I reach out to people, it's important to me that they know me for that. So I support it, and I must say, I know this is a LinkedIn endeavor, but I think LinkedIn plays a massive role in it. I use it extensively for social selling specifically.
Oh, that's good to know. And MJ, would you say you agree with what Warren says?
Definitely. I think the idea of personal brand and professional brand, it's important that you bring your authentic self out. And I actually want to take a bit of a turn left when it comes to this. In fact, I want to reflect on the prophetic tradition and the prophetic tradition within Islam, the faith I follow. And what was really interesting is the Prophet Muhammad, before he became a prophet, people actually knew him as the truthful. That's what he was known as, it was as-Sadiq. And that was his brand. And I always think like this religion of 1.6 billion people, it emanated because of the personality, because of him and the messenger and what he brought to the table and how he interacted with people. So for me, when I think personal branding, I think that. Although I must say these days, personal and professional branding, it's easy to see how the lines blur and we sort of imbibe or take on values of an organization and sometimes sacrifice your own personal brand. And I think it's an interesting sort of dilemma that we have these days. I know personally, I stopped using profanity and swearing about 6 years ago, which coincided with me joining Sasol, just because I was so aware of how I wanted to present myself online as a representative of the brand. So yeah, it's just something interesting that you're constantly navigating. And I guess it's not the right answer, the wrong answer. It's what do you feel comfortable with right now? Yeah.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. Mpumi, I would imagine that you're probably on the same page as all of us.
Yeah, pretty much. I think it, like Warren said, it actually builds down to trust. It's literally trust. So the two do often blur, and it's because there's usually trust in terms of who you are as a person, and then also the brand that you represent. Yeah, that's. I don't have really as much to say as all the other speakers. So I think it's just, yeah.
Okay, and Mpumi, maybe as still, a continuation of this particular conversation. How do you see thought leadership playing a role in business marketing today?
So thought leadership actually plays a role in terms of actually building that trust. So for the person who actually represents that particular brand that has that trust in place, does the person who comes in as the thought leader actually either contribute to that or further conveys that trust to the industry that they.
Okay, and Warren, your thoughts on that?
Thought leadership, I think the challenge with thought leadership is that brands take it literally. And we get briefed on it often. We need a thought leadership program or a thought leadership campaign. And I just feel thought leadership is something that you need to earn as opposed to create. To be known as a thought leader I think that's something that's bestowed upon you as opposed to a strategy that one pursues. In saying that, the principle behind it, I think, is spot on. I think businesses, especially in the middle and the bottom of the funnel, business decision makers need information in order to make decisions. And if a brand is the provider of that information, there's some research somewhere, I must find it for you, but there's some research somewhere that talks about the brand that educates first is more than likely the brand that gets the sale.
Oh,
and
wow.
that's thought leadership.
You share that with us.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And then, maybe MJ, if I may pose this question to you, still part of this conversation. Who do you, or would you say you think is doing it really well when it comes to thought leadership?
In terms of brands, interesting one. But before I jump into that, I just want to expand a bit on what Warren has mentioned. I think, thought leadership as a category, it's become such a cliche, almost to the point where we reduce it to a content pillar. So we say on Thursdays, we have thought leadership. And it's so problematic to sort of reduce it to that, because whenever I look at content, whenever we start to unpack, like, what sort of content do we share? I always ask myself, the content, is it credible? So does it make sense for the business? Is it in our lane? Does it push our narrative forward? Is it sustainable? So can we talk about it maybe tomorrow and create a story out of it? And is it valuable to our reader? And often when we talk about thought leadership, we don't actually ask the question, is this content valuable? But just because of title or rank or whatever it is, we call it thought leadership. And then we hope that somehow this will be something profound that changes the world. So yeah, just to add to Warren's point, I think often we reduce things to categories and buckets and cliches, and we stopped interrogating, what does it really mean to be a thought leader? Who bestows you with that title? And what is the value and the gravitas of that? So in terms of who's doing it really well, again, a very interesting space, because you've got that conflict between brands without figureheads versus the new age of brands where everything is centered on a CEO personality, and more so, and it's much more pronounced now in the tech age. So when we think Facebook, we automatically think Mark Zuckerberg, and his brand is sort of intrinsically linked to that from an entrepreneur perspective. So again, very interesting. For me, I look at different brands bringing different values, and a brand I'm going to touch on is going to be the WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment. And that's really spearheaded by its chairman, Vince McMahon, who bought the business from his father about 35 years ago, quite a hostile takeover, and he's been able to grow it into this global phenomenon. And I look at his thought leadership and his influence on the category and on entertainment, and I take some inspiration from it, but I also see some gaps there. So yeah, that's who I want to talk about, WWE.
Beautiful. And you, Mpumi?
Who's doing it really well? It's a hard question to actually answer. I mean, you get a lot of thought leaders that are that you agree or disagree with. actually, let's go on to the WWE example, since that's now fresh on my head. So I think a person who really does it really well is, what is it, Triple H, for instance, who is like head of the WWE at the moment after Vince McMahon. He's a great thought leadership in that space because he represents actually the brand that that space actually plays in. So that's another example of a great thought leadership. Or thought leader in terms of that particular industry. So it's something that is a great thought leader, someone who is very well respected in that industry and has the experience that can further enhance the brand because of who he is and the value that he actually brings into that. And also just how the brand can also tie into how he has come up with.
Okay. Thanks. Well, thanks for that, Mpumi. And I think before I go into my last question, I wanted to quickly read this comment that I see from Almarie. And I hear this a lot of the times in the boardrooms that we sit in with clients. And she says here, from a marketer's point of view, I think people are reluctant to make ballsy moves due to what is at risk at losing either clients and damaging their reputation. So maybe my question to the panelists is, what advice do you have for brands when they want to start? What would be the first steps to really get going, you know, as a basic? Warren, I'll maybe give that one to you to start off with.
I'm really passionate about this point because I think it's the one thing that holds creativity back is that marketers make decisions out of fear. They make decisions, and I'm generalizing, it's not everybody, but certainly a lot of the ones that I've worked for, they don't trust intuition enough. So I think the place to start is to have a partner that you trust, to be prepared to fail, and that it's okay if one fails. That Volvo ad, by the way, I think it was ad 6 out of 8 in a series, and the 6th one hit it. Okay, wow. So they were prepared to fail. They had the space to fail, and understanding that. I mean, so look at banking in South Africa. Look at South African banking. You know, you could take those banking ads, line them all up next to each other, put them in like a grayscale over it, and you wouldn't remove the logos. You can't tell me which is what bank. It really is, and it comes from defensive decision making, because who's going to put their neck out? Because if you put your neck out, jobs are on the line, departments are on the line. So I think to answer your question, the way to start is to be prepared to fail, trust intuition a bit more, and have the support from your board. You know, marketers don't want to make a decision because they're worried if it's wrong, I've spent a whole lot of money and then I lose my job. It's a place of fear. It's not a good place to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And MJ, do you agree with us?
Definitely. I think, you know, we talk a lot about being brave, and this is the age where we need to be brave as organizations. And sometimes I'd sit in marketing conferences and a speaker would say, be brave, but don't offend anyone. I'm like, that's odd, because to be brave means to stand for something. To be brave means to have a position and to defend it, not to sort of try to appease to everyone. You know, we need to move away from that idea that our consumer is everyone, or are we trying to be everything to everyone? We aren't. So definitely that. And to add to that, I often think about a quote by Maya Angelou, you know, about how people will forget about what you did and forget about what you said, but they won't forget about how you made them feel. And for brands to go back to that, you know, and I think sometimes when I think about my industry, specifically digital communication, not so much petrochemicals, is that often the bane of the industry in digital is that we get so obsessed with numbers and metrics and measurements that we've removed the warm and fuzzies, so that we have reduced campaigns to a cost per click and a click-through rate. And we don't actually say, what have we done in order to make someone feel something for us? You know, have we shifted an emotional barometer? And I think we need to start thinking about that, because for me, the adverts that move you are the ones that have that emotional connection, not necessarily just the ones that you tick the box in terms of this is powerful and quantifiable from a metrics perspective.
Absolutely. So what I've taken out of that is, number one, you need to be brave. Number two, you need to find the right partners. Number three is really getting that emotion out of the people. So not necessarily focusing on stats and the click-through rates. And also number four, giving yourself room to fail. Mpumi, do you want to give us maybe the fifth step there?
Yeah, fifth step is from all of that, like learn from all of those points. So when you do fail, like learn from it and use that as insights to improve on going forward. There's always something to actually be caught from that, and especially if someone just gives you that that trust and the ability to actually implement all of those. It's also just coming back with information from that that further helps in future.
Got it, got it. So I hope everybody got those steps. And maybe just before I wrap up, I've got one last question. Actually, two last questions. The one is, you know, the famous or infamous budget conversation. Who's really in control of these marketing budgets? And maybe if you can get us started from an agency perspective, and then we'll take it over to Warren and finally MJ. And maybe I'll you know, give you some context as to why I ask this. B2C rather, they get the budgets, but not B2B yet. The ROI is, you know, potentially much bigger or per deal. How do we motivate for growth, especially you know, from our side? Where do we think those roadblocks are?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the question. My mic cut. Oh, sorry, the signal cut.
Oh, no problem. So, Mpumi, I'm just talking budgets right now, and my question was to you, just around, you know, who's really in control of these marketing budgets. And why I ask this is because, you know, we see with, you know, B2C, they get the biggest stake of the pie, yet the ROI is potentially, you know, much bigger from a B2B's perspective. So, where do you think these roadblocks are, and how do we motivate for growth?
So who really has the budget is definitely the who controls the budget is actually the client. The roadblocks in terms of where that is actually shifted is whoever has the most influence in terms of the strategy that each different industry is actually going to be using. So for instance, if it all depends on the advice that you're actually getting from the team that you work with. So if the focus is mainly B2, and also just knowing what goals that the company should actually be going towards. So it's a tricky one to answer because each industry is very different from one another, but then the roadblocks will always be, for instance, the data that's actually been collected and how that's actually been conveyed towards the overall business goal, and how that is actually, and also how we read, for instance, the stats and numbers that we actually get that actually inform these business decisions. So most oftentimes is we can sometimes misinterpret certain things, whereas and then focus on the wrong markets, which is what usually happens in these cases.
Makes 100% sense. And maybe MJ, if I may ask you, do you think you know, it would be a good idea to start having our CFOs rather, of clients sitting in the boardrooms with us?
That's something interesting that just came through. Not sure what that audio was, but yeah, I see a lot more role players involved these days, you know, to the point where it becomes dead by committee sometimes. So supply chain has a much more pronounced role, but I do think the baggage really lies in B2B having to work a lot harder to fight for budget, because, you know, the assumption is that B2B might have come from an interpersonal base, and there's a few, you know, just a few role players, so those relationships are quite interpersonal. And now all of a sudden, you know, with a global marketplace, with a proliferation of choice, you have to step up your game. Yet the maturity from an organization perspective with regards to marketing spend still sits with B2C, because they've been able to develop over decades and decades. So I definitely think there's an education there in terms of who needs to be in the room. Again, you know, how do you justify this? Do you spend a lot of time defending the need for budget by bringing in the right people into the room? Or do you prove it over time? Do you build up a credible case? it really is interesting. For me, I wouldn't necessarily say, let's put the CFO in the room on day one, but I would say, let's actually make a compelling case that is simple enough for everyone to understand, that strips away all the jargon, all the barriers that make it so complicated, and say, this is what we want to achieve. Do we have a common goal of a purpose of vision? Do we have something that we're navigating towards? And then if you say it like that, then it doesn't become a marketing discussion. I think once it becomes a marketing discussion, you lose the point. It becomes a business discussion where marketing is part of that crew. So yeah, that's how I would shift the conversation.
Thank you, Mo. It really makes a lot of sense, MJ. I see we are running out of time, so I'm just going to maybe go and wrap up with our last question, which links back to everything. So if we maybe, go out there today and we need to make one quick change to our business from a B2B or thought leadership perspective, what would you do? And that's maybe, let's see who we start with. Mo. MJ.
I would turn the camera inwards. I would talk to employees. I would not necessarily speak to sales and marketing. I would get a sense from a lot of people in the organization. I will get a sense of what is it that you think we do? What value do you think we add to the world? And I would add that richness to the story.
Wow, I would have actually never thought of that, but yeah, very interesting. So using also maybe think about using your own employees as advocates too. Nice.
And across the supply chain, not just sales marketing, obviously they're valuable, but like, let's get a sense like, what is this organization about? Yeah.
And Warren, any last remarks or thoughts from your side based on that last question?
I don't know if anyone has seen the campaign. I stand to be corrected which city it was, but I think it might have been Melbourne in Australia. Where they had the Melbourne Metro, where they had an issue with children running in the train tracks and getting knocked over by trains. And they created a campaign called Dumb Ways to Die. I've just put the link in the chat box. Who approves that? How does that get approved? Okay, there is absolutely no data to support that if they do a video like that and seed it out into the internet, that is going to get the awareness that it achieved close to 200 million odd views. That's the advice I would give. It would be to implore marketers to balance the rational and pragmatic decision making with the top of the funnel emotional decision making that doesn't come out of data. It comes from intuition, it comes from gut, and it comes from trust.
Perfect. You couldn't have said it better. I think it goes back to what we said earlier on, just really finding that good balance between, that awareness and then also driving it further down the funnel. Mpumi, any final remarks from your side before I close this up?
Not too many. The only one is, like everyone has said, it's literally take a leap of faith. That's literally it. Look inwards, take a leap of faith. If you believe you can, then it'll speak for itself.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, gentlemen. This has really been a great session, and the conversations and dialogue, I think, were incredibly amazing. And to everyone who joined us in the last 2 hours, we from Turn Left Media and LinkedIn Marketing Solutions would love to give you a big thank you for joining us. We hope this was valuable and insightful. We, of course, do want to hear your opinions on the event, whether you found it informative and helpful. So please do complete the final poll for today, which is, I think the question says, how likely are you to refer this event to business colleagues and other marketers? But from us at Turn Left Media and LinkedIn Marketing Solutions, it's a thank you and have a great afternoon. Cheers. Burning